Welcome. Hello, I'm Paul Cowling with Film Independent, and welcome to our Thursday Coffee Talk with Robert Eggers. Before we start, a few words about Film Independent, if you don't know us. We're a member-based organization, a non-profit based in Los Angeles, probably most famous for the Film Independent Spirit Awards, but we also produce monthly screenings and panels and workshops and conversations, and those are open to all. Membership is open to all, so check us out at filmindependent.org. But today it's all about behind the scenes of the Lighthouse. Very pleased to have our guest with us today, Mr. Robert Eggers. Robert, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's very nice to be here.
You are currently in London, right?
I'm in Belfast.
Oh.
Yeah, I no longer have an apartment in New York, and I've been in Belfast prepping my next movie since November. And when the lockdown happened, because my son is a toddler, we decided we would just stay here. So this is not my home. This is just like the guest room in the apartment that we're living in that I've turned into an office best I can, and here we are.
Well, I would love to know a little bit more about your new film later on, but let's talk about The Lighthouse, because it's one of my favorite movies of last year. I don't know if I could ever see it again, and I mean that in the best possible sense. It is a truly intense experience. I highly recommend everyone catch this film. So take us back to the beginning. I imagine after you made The Witch, you could do anything. You're one of those lucky people that could do anything they wanted, right? Why this project?
Well, I mean, it took many years before that became the thing that went. I developed two larger movies. They were both my own scripts, but even though I could do anything I wanted, I still didn't have the clout and to make movies of a certain scale and actually be in control of them the way that I wanted. So some things didn't happen, frankly, and so but in the process of developing the two larger films and also a TV series, I called up my brother Max and I said, "Do you remember this Lighthouse movie that we were working on or talking about many years ago? We should do that because I need something in my back pocket." And so then RT Features and A24, who worked with me on The Witch, were eager to do the next thing, and New Regency had been wanting to find something, and so we all came together, and strangely, The Lighthouse was the thing that went. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to get in too much into detail about the sort of financing and stuff, but what I'm very curious about is kind of how did you pitch this to A24 and New Regency?
Well, I mean, to reference the lucky situation that I was in, I think that that they were happy to be in business with me or whatever, and I think that they liked the script, and they certainly thought it was strange but also exciting. But I always make elaborate lookbooks with my scripts, which give an idea of what the visuals are, and generally the finished film is quite close to these lookbooks. And so they knew kind of visually what it would look like to a degree. I mean, there wasn't much of a pitch really. I think there was convincing to do it on 35 millimeter black and white negative. There was some convincing there, and there was also some full frontal, like male nudity, and like an erection, and they were kind of like, look, it can be black and white and weird and all this stuff, but it can't be rated NC-17, and I thought that was very fair.
Okay.
I think if you're going to go make The Lighthouse, you know that you're making something that is hard to describe.
Right. And also shooting in well, it's not academy, is it? It's a slightly different.
It's slightly narrower than academy. It's 1:19:1, sometimes called movie tone. It was a early film, early sound film aspect ratio, and Jaron Blaschke, the DP, suggested it kind of as a joke, but initially, I thought it was a great idea because it really does take you to the past in a way that even is more extreme than academy and then additionally, it's good for shooting vertical objects like lighthouse towers and conveying the cramped interior spaces, and it's a great aspect ratio for close-ups as well. But
it's a claustrophobia, right?
Yeah.
Which you wouldn't get on widescreen, like the walls this year here in the frame.
Yeah.
And that was an easy sell for New Regency.
They were fine about that. I 10 days before we went into production, I did get a phone call kind of asking, "Are you sure you want to do this? I've seen the location. It's so beautiful, and are you sure you don't want to shoot it in widescreen? Maybe it's too fussy." And I explained for 30 or 40 minutes why it needed to be in that aspect ratio, and talking about the history of painting in Western art, and and canvases not being in CinemaScope, and so on and so forth, and to finally they just wanted to get off the phone. So
So I wanted to rewind a little bit, because I think that the germ of the story started with your brother writing a modern day Lighthouse set drama, right? And you took it over and decided to sort of dial it back to the late 1890s.
Yeah.
Why that era? And I mean, did you know a lot about that era?
About the 1890s? Yeah. I mean, it's I think there's so many films and books that are celebrated in sort of the turn of the century, the sort of late Victorian and early and Edwardian era, so and also growing up in New England, most of the antiques that are around are kind of from that period. So yeah, it was something that I'm quite familiar with. I didn't know a ton about lighthouses, but basically the reason why I settled on that period was because I wanted a Fresnel lens, which is the lens in the beacon of the lighthouse that magnifies the light. Before Fresnel lenses, it was a series of concave mirrors behind oil lanterns, which has a kind of an interesting look, but that jewel-like Fresnel lens looks almost otherworldly. It looks like a spaceship or an alien life form, and so that put us in the second half of the 19th century. And then I also wanted that foghorn, which put us, which then, if I wanted the right lighthouse station to look run down, the earliest I could place us was about 1890. And I must say that this lighthouse station is unrealistically run down. The United States Lighthouse Establishment was run like a military organization, and Defoe would have been fired long ago for keeping the lighthouse in such disrepair. But we sort of invented the idea that this lighthouse is so remote that the lighthouse inspectors never bother to go there.
Interesting. So the whole concept of him making sure that his colleague keeps everything polished and looking is very accurate, right?
That's accurate, yeah. But it's funny that he's constantly cleaning this place and it never gets clean.
And who would see it anyway?
Right.
And what about?
In actuality, I know that these lighthouse inspectors would come, and they would come unannounced and check everything out, and they would ring the bell of the ship and put up the flag, and everyone would panic and put on their uniforms and, you know, polish their buttons to make sure that they were ready for the inspector.
Like a health inspector at a restaurant. That's great.
Yeah, same thing.
And I know when we spoke, when I interviewed you about the making of The Witch, you mentioned that you have a great fondness for Shakespeare. And so what was very important for you is that your characters spoke in the sort of vernacular of the time. And that's clearly the case here as well. But what sort of research did you do to make sure that, you know, that their language was accurate? What books do you read to find all this?
I mean, we began, my brother and I began with Melville,
Okay. Yep.
New England maritime classics, and I mean, we looked at all kinds of stuff, and there's like lots of dictionaries and thesauruses and glossaries about sailor terminology. But finally, I mean, and we looked at interviews with lighthouse keepers and lighthouse keepers journals and interviews with lumberjacks and what. But the most helpful source was the writings of a Maine-based author from this period named Sarah Orne Jewett, and she would interview very working people and write her stories in dialect. And so her seafaring characters are sort of how Defoe speaks, and the farmers and stuff is more how Rob speaks. I mean, it's a synthesis of a lot of things, but she became the most helpful. And my wife found a woman who did whose name, Evelyn Starr Cutler, wrote her thesis on dialect in Jewett, and she broke down the dialects and provided rules, which was amazing because when I've written things in the 19th century that haven't been made that are more like posh English people, there are resources I can turn to with rules. Because The Witch was the time of Shakespeare, there's resources that provide rules, but for working people's dialects, we were very lucky to have found that, you know.
And for your actors, who obviously don't have the time to do as much research as you've done, what's the shortcut for them after they sign on board? I know you, in The Witch, you gave each of your actors different sort of prep materials, research materials, right? So they could understand how the sort of farming community at the time worked and lived. So
yeah, and the same, I gave them each different things, and documentaries about lighthouse keepers and certain. I gave Rob a lot more research than Willem. Willem kind of felt like the character was sort of there on the page, and it was mainly the dialect work for him. But I gave him sea shanties. I gave him a lot of stuff, but I gave Rob quite a lot of material to create a backstory with if he wanted to. And he likes to do that, like that kind of work. I think is more important to his process than it is for Willem's. So you kind of yeah.
So let's talk about the location, which is absolutely stunning. Like, how much location work is there? I think I know some of the answers to this, and how much did you have to build? Let's talk about the design. And you used your same production designer, right? Craig Lathrop?
Yep. Craig Lathrop, and he's with me again on the Northmen, making Viking villages and stuff. Yeah, I mean, we built every building in the film. That's what I wanted to do from the beginning, but this was an expensive black and white movie, so we took every effort to try to find like a lighthouse station or a lighthouse tower or something that we could start with and then build the rest. But there was nothing that served our story needs that was accessible. There's plenty of lighthouses that would have worked really well for us, but they were in real life places like the Pilot Rock, which it's never named in the movie, but that's what it's called. So we needed a place with road access and bad weather where we could build a lighthouse. And so on the southern tip of Nova Scotia, on a place called Cape Forshue, that's part of a fishing community called Yarmouth, we found our location, an inhospitable rock with great road access. So we built everything. All the exteriors are there. We built the shed is also we shot on Forshue, and then much of the scenes in the galley in the kitchen, those were shot on Cape Forshue as well. But the rest of the interiors were shot on a stage, or converted warehouses or what airplane hangars and stuff in and around Halifax. The lighthouse tower interior you had to do on set no matter what, because we have scaffold that's holding up the tower so that it can survive gale force winds, and then there's nothing in there, and then additionally you need to be able to pull walls out because the diameter of the interior is 8 feet. So like it's not about cheating, it's about like physically getting a camera and crew to like be in the space.
Yeah. You brought some material to share with us, right? From some design rendering.
Yeah, sure. These are more elaborate than the lookbooks that I first showed the people who might be financing the film, but these are the things that I make for my crew so that we can be on the same page and look for the same stuff. The title treatment for this is a little different than the one that we finally ended up with, but
this is a lookbook that you carried with you everywhere so that everyone on your team could kind of grasp your vision, but also financiers saw something similar to this?
They saw something that was like a lot shorter and a lot and more about mood and atmosphere as well. This is for my collaborators, but I showed it to the studio too, and they're interested, and it makes it look like I know what I'm doing. So here's some lighthouse tenders. Ours was from about 1912. What we found. Of course, we shoot it so wide that it really could have been CG, perhaps, but we had the real thing, which was nice. Here are some examples of some lighthouse stations that ours is based on. These are all in New England. You can see on the upper right-hand corner there a very large foghorn, and that that kind of extreme style. Like down below that on Portland Head Lighthouse, there's a much smaller foghorn from a slightly later period, which it's not quite as great.
These look like stills from your movie. That's how authentic your film looks. It's incredible.
Well, that's great. That's great.
We
like to hear. The house on the bottom left with the long flat structure is called a breezeway, which we did not intend to have a very long breezeway in the movie, but the geography of Cape Forshue made it so that we needed this incredibly long breezeway, and it became kind of a fun detail. Here are some lighthouse beacons with the same size lens as ours. One thing, the weather vane that we have is actually more a European thing. It was very common on lighthouses on New England, but it was a story beat that I liked and thought was important. Texture. We have Wyeth paintings are a big part, a big reference for archetypal New England. So he's sometimes he's kind of played out, but he he's important reference to know that we're on track. The cistern that we ended up doing is a little bit more sophisticated than these big wooden buckets, but that was the original idea. But the production designer Craig encouraged me to do a brick cistern that was porridged over with a kind of plaster. Here's the boathouse with the runners that go out to the sea, which again, like, part of with me and my brother's research, when we kept seeing these boathouse with these long runners in our research, we thought, like, we got to build a scene around that because that's cool, and so we did. There's a film still. I try not to do too many stills from other movies, try to keep the research about life, but there's a still from Through a Glass Darkly on the bottom there, in the shipwreck boat, just to convey a little bit of atmosphere that I liked, although that lighting is more polished than anything we do in our movie. Fog Signal House. I mean, I don't know. Am I taking this too long? I can flip through it a little more quickly, but you get the idea.
You're referencing a lot of Bergman in this, right?
For sure.
Not referencing, but sort of taking some inspiration from.
Big time. I mean, all of his films on Fura are a big influence on this movie for sure. For sure.
Persona as well, right?
yeah. Which
trapped on an island.
Yeah. And again, these are really helpful because it just saves a lot of discussion. That's the cast iron pot, that's the pipes, that's the chair, that's, and you can kind of, keep things simple. But sometimes you can't find the stuff, and sometimes the designers push us further. So I had this roll top desk, and Ian, the set decorator, thought that was, while they very much existed in New England, that they say like the Wild West to people. And I said, oh, you're right. Like, let's see what else we can do. Maybe can we find a bucket top desk? I don't, whatever. Anyway, the desk he found is beautiful and very unique and transportive and much better than my suggestion. So as much as I'm detail oriented, I can be persuaded otherwise by better ideas.
Yeah, I mean, for people who are not sort of don't think visually, something like this is really, really helpful for them to grasp your the concepts and your vision.
For sure. Though, of course, like, the people in the art department, like, should be able to think visually. But But the simpler version of this, when you show this to, like, I mean, I had this kind of elaborate lookbook for The Witch before it was financed, which was very helpful in people finally financing it.
Right.
And I'll just quickly run through, sorry that I don't know the keystrokes for everything. The characters are called young and old in the screenplay, and we're referred to young and old the entire time we shot the film and all through post. But that was just because it was just for clarity's sake. Okay. Well. Okay. Boom.
Who did you have a team sourcing all this, doing the research, or did you pull a lot of it yourself?
No, this is all me.
Wow.
I mean, that's not entirely true. Some of the buildings were things that Craig had found in his research, and of course, Craig finds a lot more research, and Linda, the costume designer, finds a lot more research on top of the research that I do. But like, but it starts out like this. But yeah, I'd say like all this is documents all my research, and I'd say that the production design is 95% stuff that I found. So yeah, so those are the kinds of things I make.
Wow.
But this new movie, the scale is so huge that while I do like I did make like a very elaborate lookbook where I combine costumes and sets, but there's so many different more locations and so many different things that the scale's so large that I cannot literally do every single know every single prop like myself before I bring my collaborators on to come together. So that's been a challenge with the new movie. But I trust Craig and Linda so much that once we are doing approvals, it's very rare that I'm not excited and by what they've done and their collaborators have done.
Going back to the Lighthouse quickly, you mentioned you wanted a location with terrible weather. How much did you have to control the weather, like just sort of with like rain machines and stuff? And how much of it was real? How much did you fake with effects?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's about 50-50. I'd say that most of the most dramatic weather is real. A lot of times it was just sort of soft rain that was faked, but certainly the giant waves hitting the lighthouse tower were like dump trucks and water and water cannons, and when they're launching the boat into the into the ocean, like it was really raining, it was really windy, but like again those waves were made by us so that we wouldn't lose Robert Pattinson to a riptide or whatever.
Yeah, how do you prepare your actors for such grueling conditions?
I mean, they are up for it. I mean, Rob and Dafoe choose challenging material, and they knew what they were getting themselves into. So, I mean, it wasn't easy, and it wasn't always fun exactly. But as Willem says, you don't have to act it if it's happening to you.
Well, yeah, I was wondering, like, if there are other things to help them get into that headspace. Did they spend time together beforehand, or did this?
Well, we had a rehearsal period that together, and we also went to the lighthouse and they checked it out. Willem lived in a little fisherman's cottage very close to the location, actually. So he was always like semi-marinated in the world. So he waking up to making a fire and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about the seagulls. The seagulls are amazing. They're the most stubborn animals on the best of days. Do you have trained seagulls?
We did.
Where did you find trained seagulls?
In England, where all the classically trained actors are. Yeah, so the like outside of London, there's a French guy who is really great with birds. He did the owls for Harry Potter, and basically these three seagulls were injured and rehabilitated, and they can't survive in nature. So they're trained to do tasks, which is kind of what keeps them from being too depressed. So they were great. They were really, really, really very talented. So it's three birds that do all the seagull work.
Did you shoot that in England, or did you fly them over?
No. We shot that at Pinewood.
Okay. Is some of that faked then?
Yeah. Movie magic.
Can you talk a little bit about how you shoot a seagull in Pinewood and then insert it into an image shot in Nova Scotia?
Yeah, I've been reluctant to talk about this in such detail, but
you don't have to.
It's fine. I mean, whatever. It doesn't matter. Basically, we shot. Rob shot his scenes with a puppet, and that puppet barely makes its way into the film. But there was a puppet that did all the scenes with Rob, and then we would shoot a plate without a seagull in it, and then we would do sort of stuff for to record the lighting conditions. So then we like rebuilt portions of the set in Pinewood and shot the birds in Pinewood, and then put them into the movie.
Right. So how long was your production in total?
It was about 35 days in Nova Scotia, plus 3 or 4 days of seagulls and 1 short day of logs in Brooklyn. So some of the log sequence in the beginning, the dream where the lumberjack is washed up was done in a warehouse close to my old apartment in Brooklyn.
And then post takes place where? Also
in New York.
Okay.
And
and how much visual effects, other than like sort of inserting the seagulls in, were there other sort of visual effects you did?
Yeah, I mean, there's the usual kind of cleanup stuff that happens on movies of this budget these days, which is a shame, but it's just kind of how it is. I mean, obviously that the last shot, if we only have 3 seagulls, like that's obviously gonna take a lot of visual effects. But it's mainly like erasing stuff. It's mainly erasing harnesses, because when they're like standing on the edge of a cliff, they're like wearing a harness. When there's an additional harness when Rob's whitewashing this side of the lighthouse that needed to be erased. There's safety boats that need to be erased. It's a lot of erasing.
Right, but most of the sort of elements, the nature's elements that are in the shots, was shot in camera where possible.
Yeah, well, I also even if I am doing like some comp work, I want to shoot the real thing. I don't want to make stuff in CG.
Yeah. We're almost time for some questions. We have a lot of questions coming up. Anyone who hasn't asked a question can use the question tab, and I'll try to get to as many of these as possible. So yeah, the film debuted at Cannes. It won the Fapresi Award, right? And yeah, has gone on to, like, I think, Spirit Award nominations, 2 Spirit Award wins, and an Oscar nomination for your DP. It's been amazing, the response. How do you feel about the people really have embraced a movie about like late 19th century lighthouse keepers going crazy?
I'm grateful. I'm humbled. I'm relieved. I mean, there was a lot of pressure with The Witch, and I was like quite terrified at Cannes, and A24 and Robert Pattinson, Willem Dafoe have all had movies not go well at Cannes in the past, and they all told me all about how terrible it is when they don't go well, and so I was quite frightened. But no, of course, it's incredibly gratifying when people understand what you're doing. I mean, it's a lot of work to make a movie.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the project you're working on now. What you can tell us.
What's been reported is that it's a Viking revenge saga. It takes place at the turn of the 10th century. Some of it takes place in Iceland. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of fun. I'm digging myself into holes with the same problems of animals and boats and things that like you should never do, and more inhospitable locations. But that's okay. I have all my heads of department back with me, which is incredibly fun. It was also like we went into this very quickly after the Lighthouse, so that felt really good. So when the hiatus happened, that felt particularly not so good. Yeah, just I don't know. I mean, I'm being coy, but if perhaps I can be prodded with questions, or we can move on to other people's
You're
questions.
collaborating with Jean. How to pronounce his name?
Sion is
Yeah.
an Icelandic novelist and poet who's really quite incredible. We met at a cocktail party, and I didn't know him. I didn't know his work, and he said, I said, so I understand you're a writer. Like, what do you do? And he's like, well, I just finished a book about witchcraft in 17th century Iceland. And I thought, oh, cool. So we talked a lot that evening. And
Of
then
course, you hit it off.
yeah, of course. So then I went home and I read some of his work, and I thought, really, this guy's incredible. So while no one is going to, throw tomatoes and stones at me for, appropriating Nordic culture, I still wanted, a real Viking to write this Viking saga with me. And Iceland's popular these days, so I'm sure everyone knows this. But but really, Icelanders have this connection to this Viking past. Like Sion can tell you the saga figures that he's directly related to, and there is there's aspects of Viking culture that remain in contemporary culture there. So and Sion is, Viking movie or no Viking movie, he's a great writer and a great collaborator.
Yeah, I'd never heard of him until it was you recommended The Blue Fox to me, which I loved. But then I read more about him, and he's known here for collaborating with Björk quite a bit, right?
Yep, for sure.
And co-writing some of the songs from Dancer in the Dark with her, I believe.
That's right.
And has an Oscar nomination for
yes,
one of those. Yeah. So yeah, I'm like, oh, okay, this guy. Some questions here. Chris is asking about your new film. You mentioned you've been prepping for a film for the last 5 months. What does that prep process entail, and what does that look like daily?
Frankly, I've never written so many emails in my entire life. And I feel like I was just like in the office writing emails all day, much to my chagrin. But there's many locations in the film, so we're constantly going on scouts, or as they call them over here, recce's, to like find places or reassess places that we've found, and we're building sets there. So we're staking things out and restaking things out and understanding how we can, once you put the buildings there, that's where they're going to be, and you have to make sure that you can shoot all your scenes in that location with the buildings in that way. We're designing all these worlds. We're building all these villages. We're making thousands of costumes, making all the props, training the horses to do the things the horses need to do. Everything. Everything. Designing the shots of the film. There's a lot more storyboarding. I prefer. In the past, I preferred Gestalt list, and Jaron and I would storyboard the scenes that had visual effects, animals, stunts, things where all the different departments really need to be on the same page for it to work out. But this movie, there's rarely a scene that isn't on a boat or has a lot of extras or whatever. So we are storyboarding most of the film, and so that's taking a lot of time as well. And that's something that we're continuing to do now on this hiatus.
Right. You told me, I think, before we started that the lockdown came like a week before you were meant to start shooting.
Yeah, we were, most of the actors were there. We had begun rehearsals. We were doing hair and makeup and costume tests. It was very close.
But there are other things that are continuing now. They continue making the costume.
There is a very, very small crew that is still working from home on certain things. There's an armorer, 2 armorers are working from home making armor for lead characters. There are prosthetics being made. There's, I'm doing my work with the DP and Jaren, the storyboard artist. There are things that need to be happening. I mean, the location manager, Naomi's constantly having to check on all of our locations that are, sitting with semi-built sets,
So Ryan says, do you write your scripts with the traditional idea of the protagonist having a goal that they actively pursue throughout the story? It doesn't seem like The Lighthouse has this.
Yeah, was definitely not the the Lighthouse, to be self-deprecating but quite honest, like, is the same scene over and over and over again, only slightly different. If you're looking for good traditional narrative storytelling, like, this is not the movie for you, for sure. This is sometimes you're in the mood for Mary Poppins, and sometimes you're in the mood for Lost Highway. And it's been fun on working on The Northman, which has a central protagonist with a very clear goal, and to need to do storytelling that's incredibly clear, and where clarity is helping, is helping. I know that sounds like an obvious thing, but certainly for The Lighthouse, a lot of the work was trying to obscure things. There are versions of the script that my brother and I found were too clear, but the intention is for the audience to become, to go mad and become confused like Winslow, and be putting it together as they go and thrown off course. So that was done with care. But no, I mean, Rob's character doesn't know what he wants. That's kind of like his problem. So that's, isn't that how many of us are in life?
Yep.
But again, that generally doesn't make for like a super compelling story. So I get it.
It's from Jesse. When I saw The Lighthouse, I thought it was surprisingly funny, and at times reminded me of the work of Neil Simon. At what point in your process did you start adding humor to it, and why?
From the beginning, The Witch hadn't gotten made, but I had written it, or a version of it, and I wanted to explore something that was going to be able to laugh at misery instead of just be miserable, to sort of contrast The Witch. So it started with farting from the beginning. Although Rob and Willem are such good comedians, I was concerned it was going to be too funny when we were shooting the film, but we were able to find the tone through sound design and in the edit.
Couple of questions about the lookbook. What program do you make your lookbooks in, says Tara. And Devin says, do you do lookbooks for post departments as well, such as like sound design? Would that be a sound book? I don't know. A listen book?
I like that idea. I've never done that, but I think I should do that. I mean, certainly I share like examples of stuff that I like the sound of with the sound designer, but it's usually a bit less organized than these lookbooks. I just use Pages. When sometimes for a lookbook that I'm pitching, I will use like Photoshop and InDesign to make something that I can have more control over and can be like really polished and professional. But these are more sort of internal things, and so Pages is easy.
Following on that, kind of on the same lines, Matthew says A24 created a beautiful screenplay book for The Witch, as well as Ex Machina and Moonlight. Do you know if they're going to do one for The Lighthouse?
I hope so, but I don't know. I hope so.
Caitlin
that was a
said,
very whole process, and they did a nice job.
Yeah. Caitlin says, hi, Robert. Do you have a favorite memory from working on the set of The Lighthouse? The most memorable day of shooting, for example. Love you and your films. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the compliment. I don't know. There are so many days. I mean, shooting the mermaid swimming was pretty crazy because she couldn't walk around in her tail, and so they had to and we shot that in a large tank in Halifax where they train emergency divers, and so she was in this kind of looked like an Egyptian sarcophagus kind of tail. And they hoisted her up on a crane and then lowered her into an inflatable pool full of hot water where she was sitting inside this larger tank. And it was just, that was weird. But I mean, there was, so many memorable things. I mean, Defoe as the sea god. That was. It was a crazy shoot. We did it with I don't know.
How does a mermaid get around between shots? Just everyone brings stuff to her?
Yeah, I mean, well, really, she was carried around either on this crane or on a bier. When we did the scene on the beach, they were carrying her on a bier, kind of like a stretcher, out to the beach.
Yeah. Nancy asks, can you talk about your writing process, please? That's
sure.
An hour with that, right?
Yeah, I could direct you to a lecture that I did on my writing process that's on YouTube. I'm sure you can find it. But it's research based, and that's fun for me because it gives me a lot of freedom because it's easy to find inspiration. I don't usually get writer's block because I can kind of pick up a book and write something. Might not be good, but at least I'm continuing to write. So that's pretty vague, but there's certainly stuff out there where that's more detailed.
G. Zaver asks how did Chris Columbus get involved with The Witch and the Lighthouse?
Chris Columbus
signs it, George. Thanks, George.
Sorry, what's that?
No, that's just the sign off. It's from George asking about Chris Columbus.
Yeah. So we, as so many indie movies do, we kind of ran out of financing because one of our financiers backed out with The Witch. So we were kind of doing post with Monopoly money, and we needed to finish the movie. And we screened the film for Chris Columbus and his daughter Eleanor, who have Maiden Voyage that helps out first and second time filmmakers. And they liked it, and they helped out. And then Chris has been a great mentor ever since. And he found us those seagulls. So thanks, Chris.
Jake asks, how much did your actors stick to the script, and were there any bits of improvisation, especially considering the specific language of the film?
No, I mean, Mike Lee, and there's probably other people, but Mike Lee is the only director that I know of who workshops a period movie with this kind of specific dialogue and dialect to be able to have actors be able to improvise like that. The rehearsal period was a week. It would be completely impossible for them to improvise the dialogue. So anything that's not the same as the script was an accident.
A lot of people asking for sort of recommendations or sort of inspirations. Caitlin says you've made 2 of the best horror movies of the last decade.
Very kind.
What are some of your personal all-time favorite horror films, from one horror fanatic to another?
I mean, clearly The Shining is I'm overly influenced by The Shining. Alien is great. I love German Expressionism and Hammer and Universal horror movies and Val Lewton and stuff. The sort of canonical 80s movies I was too afraid of as a kid, and I didn't see a lot of them until much later. So I was sort of too old to appreciate them and their like I don't have nostalgia around them, and so I kind of see them as not so awesome. Although Hellraiser was pretty cool, which I only saw a few years ago, embarrassingly. But yeah.
Jake asked how many feet of film was shot for the Lighthouse.
I do not know that question. I wish that I did, but more than the producers wish we had. I'll tell you that.
Question about The Witch from Adam. Can you elaborate on the process of directing a young boy for his death scene in The Witch?
Well, that was tough, and it was very collaborative. Ralph Ineson and Kate Dickey, who played the parents, were very helpful. For whatever reason, I just didn't have the greatest chemistry with Harvey in the beginning. Harvey played Caleb. I think he was more of like a lad and like into playing, football / soccer, football, whatever. I'm like, my son's learning to talk, and we've been in the UK forever, and we're going to be here for a lot longer. And then Post is in London, so I'm like, should I be telling him football instead of soccer? Should I be telling him trousers instead of pants? Like, I guess I should. Anyway, Ralph was kind of saying you need to direct him like a coach, like a sports coach. And that was very helpful. But then we also knew that like Harvey couldn't understand the sexual aspects of what he was doing. It would be inappropriate at his age, and it would also have just like shut him down. Like even if it were appropriate, which it wouldn't have been, it would have shut him down. So it was a lot. It was kind of like a dance, and we talked about him being very thirsty and like needing to and touching his lips because they're very dry and he's parched, and trying to look for ways around, him dying in this semi-orgasmic way. And we also knew that scene had to work, or the rest of the movie was not going to work. So that was rehearsed in the hotel. We rehearsed it a lot together, but then Ralph and Kate like drilled this scene over and over again, like on the weekends with Harvey. And then on set, I was a football coach, I guess you could say.
Jake asks, how many drafts of The Lighthouse did you write?
That's a good question. I don't know. A lot, probably. I mean, I think there was only 3 or 4 external drafts, but it takes many internal drafts to get to a draft that you share with other people. So, but there was about 4, I think, that were published, so to speak. It took a long time to figure out what the hell we were doing. So.
Do you stick closely to a storyboard when you are shooting, or do you allow yourself to improvise shots on the set?
Because I'm after a level of craft that I can't have with my level of experience, Jaron and I tend to kind of stick to what we've planned. So just so that we can make our day. And we think a lot about it before we commit to something. That said, being really prepared can prepare you sometimes to come up with something better. But if it's rarely much different. It's rarely much different.
Claire asks, I'm working on a project set in the 19th century. Could you please share some dialogue resources? The characters range from working class to upper class.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's if you Google 19th century slang dictionary and Victorian, I mean, it depends on where it's set, of course. But I also, but if you Google those dictionaries, you can find them easily. I don't have my books here. I would show you some covers of things that would be helpful, but also, try to find books that are in your period, published in the period, written in the period, that take place where your story takes place, and look for turns of phrase, and write it down.
Question from Arteria. What was your approach for the music?
Well, originally I wanted no strings because The Witch was so string heavy. But Mark Corvin, the composer, was like, you're going to want some strings. And in the end, there's plenty of strings in the movie, but I wanted it only to be horns and pipes and things that felt like the sea, and like Willem Dafoe's farts, and like the foghorn. And that's most of what's going on there. But we needed something that kind of also, because the score in the beginning was quite experimental and weird, and would have made a nice experimental album, but it wasn't quite suiting the film, and we needed something that did match the fact that it looked like a black and white old-timey movie to some extent. So we have these sort of Bernard Herrmann-esque string passages that I think help kind of tie everything together. Sometimes they're on the nose to the point of like tongue-in-cheek, but I think that it was needed.
I wonder how many directors have said, I want my music to sound like Willem Dafoe's farts. We're almost out of time. Our final question for everyone, and I'll roll one in here from Mido as well, who's asking kind of recommendations for reading, what you read and read for inspiration, but also just what are you watching right now? What should everyone sort of check out? It can be like a forgotten classic, like a hidden gem, or just dig as deep as you like.
Yeah, I mean, I read for whatever I'm working on. For pleasure, I like Mackin and Blackwood and M.R. James and stuff like that. And also lots of comparative mythology and comparative religion. Right now I've been reading a lot of Viking sagas and Viking books, but I recommend the sagas. If you're also Johanna Katrin Friedrichsdotter, who's one of the advisors on the film, that's another one of the best things about working on a movie this size, is that I reached out to some of my favorite Viking historians and my favorite Viking historians, and they just said yes. No one who I reached out to said no. So I'm working with these incredible historians, which is one of the most fun, inspiring things ever. But anyway, Johanna wrote a book, Valkyrie, which you can get on Amazon and anywhere you buy books, which is sort of the most up-to-date book about female experience in the Viking Age, and I highly recommend it. But yeah, as far as films, I got a bunch of box sets of Theo Angelopoulos, the Greek director, who I've only seen some of his work, and I've been kind of going through that in this period. And I also was such a snob when I was in my early days that I missed out on a lot of really good Kurosawa, because I really like Ron and Throne of Blood and Rashomon, and Kagamusha and a few others I really appreciated, but like the more fun ones like Yojimbo and Sanjuro and Hidden Fortress, like I've kind of tonally thought that they were too goofy when I was like really getting to know Kurosawa, but I've been watching those in the Criterion channel, and I really missed out being such a snob.
Hidden Fortress was the biggest inspiration for Star Wars, right?
Yep. But I mean, you see it and it's mainly like those. There's some things, but it's not. Have
you seen High and Low?
I have.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's great. But of course, knowing like I prefer all the like more the older the better. Like in the time period of
feudal Japan.
Yeah, that's more fun for me.
Right.
Plus, and with doing the Viking stuff, it's like, I'm looking at staging horses and sword fights and blah, blah, blah.
Well, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much for spending the hour with us, Robert. Good luck with your Viking epic. I hope it gets back into production soon.
Yeah.
Before your son starts speaking with a Belfast accent.
Indeed.
And hopefully you'll come back and join us when it's over, when it's complete and out in cinemas. So
I would love to.
So please take care and stay safe. This has been a Coffee Talk for Film Independent. Check out more from us at filmindependent.org. We're back with another Coffee Talk next week. But from me, Paul Cowling, saying goodbye. Thank you. And Robert Eggers. Thank you so much, Robert.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you soon. Bye.